Hi everyone, my name's Nat and welcome to Thursday's webinars. Every Thursday we do educational content, which is fun, engaging, enlightening, inspiring and astounding. Lots of adjectives there. Today we are going to go a little bit more sciencey than we've done recently. We're going to be looking at we look at the brain, and more importantly, we're going to look at it regarding ADHD. Can you tell if someone has ADHD when you look at their brain? Can you diagnose someone through brain scans? We are going to also be looking at machine learning, how AI is coming to play into it, whether or not we should be using CAT scans, fRMI, all that good stuff. Today, we are focusing on ADHD. However, a lot of these things can be applied across the board. Maybe more autism and ADHD than necessarily dyspraxia and dyslexia, but there are still differences in the brain, just maybe not as noticeable. Here's me. I've got a master's in neuroscience now, so you can trust me. I have referenced everything, so please do check them out if you want to back up, because what I've done is I took complicated things and I compressed it into bite-sized chunks. So naturally, we do lose a little bit of nuance along the way. Here's our team. We've got myself, we've got April, and we've got Jess. The last webinar we have online is dyscalculia and dysgraphia, looking at exceptional individuals. Yeah, see what we did there? It was a bit of a difficult session, to be honest, because there really aren't that many people who have publicly spoken about it. Daniel Radcliffe, typically known for dyspraxia, there are a lot of similarities to what he said. For Christie, very much known for dysgraphia. We've got some TV presenters, singers. Yeah, check it out. ADHD neuroimaging. What is it? Basically, it's taking a picture of the brain. But you may have noticed it's a little bit difficult to take a selfie of the old brain because you've got all this stuff on top, which is a little bit annoying. So we have special images which allow us to go beneath the surface and see how brains develop and how they develop compared to neurotypical individuals. I probably should mention though that today's terminology is going to be quite scientific, quite clinical, and quite honestly, not that progressive. You'll see things where it says comparing a healthy brain with an ADHD brain. That might be like warning signs. That doesn't sound very progressive. It's just how they talk in the science community. Not my fault, just letting you know. Today's subject, nice and simple, brain imaging. We're just going to be looking at what it is and where are we at the moment with understanding ADHD in relation to brain imagery. As I'm sure a lot of you will know, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and it is a psychological condition which is diagnosed through visual observations. But as we are getting better and better understanding the brain and the images that we can do with different equipment, maybe the way we understand ADHD is going to change as well going forward. At first, I want you to just rank disorders by financial burden. I did tell you this language wasn't going to be that progressive. On here, which one of these do you think costs the most amount of money for us to deal with? Since the early 2000s, it really has been the decade of the brain. We have been learning more and more about the brain. It's been like a brain explosion, which sounds messy. Just our understanding has doubled. The burden just means how much money is it going to cost the general taxpayer in order to support these different brains? Spoiler, it's going to be expensive. We've got interesting heart disease, alcohol, dementia, cerebrovascular palsy disorder. Don't worry if you don't know what half these are, not overly important. The important thing to know is that we need to do something. We can't just leave it be because more and more people are having brain disorders. Why? That could be for a number of factors. As always, we are looking at neurodivergence today. We know about 4 out of 5 of the top disorders by the end of the decade will be brain disorders in terms of the financial impact they have on our economy. Why do you think that is a problem? Is it a problem that more people are having disorders that are brain related? Or is it a problem because it's going to cost more? Or is there other reasons? Honestly, like brain disorders, we're talking about things you can't physically see. Typically, they'll be due to early development in the womb. They might be factors as we get older, our brain starts to deteriorate. For instance, Alzheimer's could be heritable. So more people who otherwise wouldn't have had children who had a brain disorder are having children, or it could be we've got an increased amount of chromosomal changes, potentially due to environmental factors, maybe like pollutions or who knows what. We've got more people want to get diagnosed with brain disorders. I would say maybe they just want more support. Everyone knows that. Why should some people who are diagnosed get support and those without diagnosis not get support? Maybe that's a reason. Less people are in work contributing to the economy while adding the strain on the NHS. Yeah, unfortunately, a large amount of autistic individuals in the UK are unemployed. It's ridiculous. And yet they're quickly able to work. More expensive testing? Yes, it is expensive. Lack of understanding of society and supporting waiting times, assessment, more investment into research and science will be required to get accurate training and treatment in various brain disorders. Yeah, but honestly, all of these and more. It's a problem because essentially more people that need support, more people out of work, less money going to the economy, more money being needing to do on support services, just to name a few. We've got a problem here because with most conditions, it's quite easy in order to support and relieve the burden. But when it comes to brain disorder, we've got a skull in the way, which is quite thick. So we can't really do much about it. Back in the old days, though, not a problem. Slice and dice, cut, drill, poke and prod, and we were in the brain. Barely an inconvenience. But I'm sure a lot of you wouldn't like that. Look at that guy. He looks a bit out of it, to be fair. He's got some alcohol, I think, just to take the edge off. This woman is so damn bored, she's balancing the book on her head. But it shows you that we have been doing operations or procedures on the brain for a very long time. Like cavemen, we've got images of holes where they've done it to relieve pressure or to remove madness. Not very effective, but we've always been interested. We finally reached that point in history where we don't have to be slicing and dicing anymore. We can access the brain in a non-invasive way. The next stage of the puzzle is how do we interpret that data? That is the thing that a lot of people don't consider. Yeah, easy to take a photo, but how do we know what that photo means? We are going to be looking at images of those with ADHD and without ADHD. And I want you to tell me, do you know the difference? Would you be able to look at it? You might not be able to. AI is getting ridiculously good. Marsh says, tri-panning is one of the oldest surgical procedures. Yes, absolutely right. We have been doing those procedures for a long time. Not that I'd recommend it necessarily. There are benefits, but this is definitely not a DIY project. Along came the way of, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this, magnetic resonance images. This is when you go in a big old tube and it scans your brain and it allows you to have a look under the hood. This is really common. A lot of people have used it. In a previous webinar, we spoke about the potential that in the future, schools might have their own MRI machine on campus, which allows them to understand the development of children. So you can measure them each time. You'd get your photo as a child and your parents would have to pay exorbitant prices to have a nice picture of you smiling to go on the fridge. Imagine if they did that every year, but for your brain. That is something that we could do. Only imaging reveals brain biology. Ever had an MRI? I remember when we did a previous session, I think, Emma, you told me you have had an MRI. Yeah. I don't know anyone else, have any of you? They can be a little bit scary, very claustrophobic, probably quite tight. They can be incredibly noisy. If you are neurodivergent and you already have sensory sensitivities, this could be quite a traumatic process. But we've got an actual image here of a 4-year-old girl compared with a 4-year-old boy, both with ADHD. I'll be honest with you, I'm looking at these. Could I tell the difference about which one's male, which one's female, which one has ADHD? No, but this is something which a trained eye may be able to, or maybe AI can, or maybe that's just not even remotely possible. Vicky says, I found it extremely relaxing and nearly fell asleep. But then I'm a bit weird like that. Jess also had one. So some people find them very relaxing. Interesting. Are there any risks with doing regular? You don't want to do them too often. That's the same. There's a reason why people have to wear gloves and protect themselves, to be honest. I would do it daily. For different types of scans, some of them will have radiation. Others will use types of dyes that people could have allergic to. Different images will have its pros and cons. What do you think are the top benefits of machines? If you have ADHD or you know someone with ADHD, why would you want to have a scan? What would you hope to gain from it? Are you doing it for the lols? Do you just want to see under the hood? Or could you see some tangible benefit that may be attached to it? April says the scans of the boy's brain looks like boys have more grey matter in their brain than girls do. That is true, April. Grey matter and white matter is something that we are able to monitor in scans. Is it growing? Is it shrinking? The difference between those with and without, different sexes, different genders. We've got to understand yourself. I took a DNA test and it told me, oh, you look like you don't have much motivation. I don't know how a DNA test could tell me that, but it did. Specialist, but I would love to know more about my brain. I remember when I went to the dentist, they gave me a scan of my mouth. I asked them if I could keep it. They said no, but I'm still fascinated to see how things work, to understand objective versus subjective. Yep, current processes is very subjective. I want to get rid of that. Get rid of any of that neurodevelopmental corruption that's clearly lurking. Specialist treatment. Yep, absolutely. Personalized treatment as well. Things that are made for you rather than just a wide net and see what you catch. April says, I think MRIs are beneficial for ADHD to give people a better idea of diagnosis. Yeah, because at the moment, some people don't think it's a real thing. Obviously we do. We know it is, but some people don't. Maybe this would put it to rest. That being said, hate is going to hate. We've known the world is round for a while now. A lot of people still think it's flat, but yet you tell them they go on an aeroplane, not listening. I think you can only tell people so much. Let's look at some actual brains. Which one shows medicated ADHD? We know for ADHD, you might take medication. How do we know the medication is working? This is where a scan could actually come really handy. Have a look at these brains. They may look similar, but there are differences. We can tell how effective medication is, how the body is absorbing it, what parts is it reaching. This might indicate whether or not someone has ADHD if we know how the medication is affecting them. Researchers have found that ADHD patients have significantly lower brain iron levels. Interesting. Magnetic field correlation, MFC, uses MRI to measure magnetic differences in tissues. It shows most small and large irregularities. You see the scale here, the MFC, that stands for magnetic field correlations. This is searching for irregularities compared to a base brain, or as they would say, a healthy brain. The different colors will show you. Let's see what you got. Which one is heavy medicated? This one here is the non-medicated brain. This one here is the medicated brain. And this one here is the non-ADHD brain. You'll see that there's different colors. These colors aren't really what shows up. They're added afterwards to help us visualize it, but you will see different amounts of iron levels, essentially. Here is a short video, but this gives us an idea about why understanding the brain are really important. This is from King's College London. But the general gist is that we know the brain develops differently in ADHD compared to those without ADHD. We know ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. It develops normally slower than someone without ADHD, but it does typically catch up. As a result, the brain tends to make different wirings and different connections. We know this because we have done, say, MRI scans on children as they grew up. Could this be something that we'd all benefit from, knowing how our brain develops? Is it developing on track or is it not? Or will that not really help us? Is it more useful about the support strategies and the support tips? Because that is a question I've been thinking. While I love neuroscience and I love all the gadgets and gizmos, would it actually change anything? Yeah, it's useful for research, but how useful is it for day-to-day life and making sure people have the support they need? If you sent a teacher a bunch of reports to show someone's brain developing slightly different, would they at all do anything different with their teaching styles? Probably not. Currently, traditional psychological reports still tend to be more beneficial. Let me know if you think differently, though, by all means. Let's just have a little look at some other scans, because it's the gold standard. It's the one we're liking at the moment. CT scans, on the other hand, they have their usage. They're not going to be useful for ADHD, so don't bother having one. These are your conventional X-rays, and they're really good at looking at bones, more dense matter, and they can see fractures. They're very good for breaks. They're not very good for soft tissue. This is why you'd want to use MRI. Different types of scanning, but one's going to give you a lovely picture. One's going to give you a picture that looks like it was shot on a potato. Let's see if you know the difference. On here, I want you to slide left or right if you know which one is an MRI scan and which one is a cat. It's not a cat taking a photo, but that is a fun image to think of, but a cat scan. Which one is a high-res image of soft tissue and organs? One of these is great for taking pictures of, say, your lung or your heart, or maybe even your brain. Yes, it is MRI. Definitely. A CAT scan would look like just a blurry blob. On the top here, we've got our MRI scans. You can see the white matter and gray matter. You can see the different densities. And for the CAT scan, it's all just one big blur, not really that useful. Let's say you had a fracture on your skull or cranium. Suddenly the MRI one doesn't look like it'll be that useful. But the CT scan, you can see a very firm layer here. You'd be able very clearly to see if there's any fractures or cuts. They're both useful, but because we are particularly looking at ADHD today, it's not. No ionizing radiation, CAT scans are winning. So if you don't want radiation, CAT scans are better. But remember, it's a very small bit of radiation. This is why I wouldn't have these tests every single day, but now and then, it's going to be fine. Amira says, there's a huge problem with the education system and how they teach neurodivergent children. For instance, my brother is autistic and has very bad sensory issues, yet the school will not give him a teaching assistant to help. This is the case for many children, and they mostly are forced to deal with it or go to special schools, unfortunately. It is, and maybe if we understood earlier on, we could support people. We've got preferred for neuro conditions, absolutely MRI. Good for fractures and trauma, it is a CAT scan. We're all on the same page here. It's good to know because if you went to get scanned to understand ADHD brains better and you had a CT scan, it's going to be useless. I'm not even sure I have a brain. It looks like the head's empty. Not even that useful. Let's see if you got the gist now. Which one of these is an MRI scan? Is it the first one or the second one? Woohoo! It is the second one. First one, CAT scan. Second one, MRI. The MRI, you can start to see that's an actual brain. You'll notice that this picture is black and white because that is how the images come out. But when you see images that have red or yellow to show maybe different areas where there's different kind of chemicals or different electricity use in the brain, this is color which is added later on just to help visually understand. The image doesn't come out in color. Maybe one day it might, but not at the moment. Marsh says, I was stunted between different schools due to a plethora of issues that I later found out was just undiagnosed ADHD. I'm sorry to hear that. Imagine if you got help really early on, because ADHD is developmental. It means getting support early on is absolutely crucial. Otherwise, we learn bad habits and it's harder to find ways around it. I have been bigging up MRI since we started. MRI this, MRI that, flipping love MRI. But not all sunshines and rainbows. Look at that little poop emoji. What do you think are the downside? Why might we not want to use MRI? Hilly related to think, imagine this, you've got ADHD. I was like, don't worry, bro, get in that machine and we'll understand your brain a little bit better. How could this possibly go wrong? This is a fun image, by the way, because these machines are very magnetic, as in the name, and sometimes they have a knack of swallowing things. Watches, phones, they'll take it all. Don't get one of these machines if you have some metal in your head. Tell them first. What have we got here? Tight spaces. Absolutely. Some people could find them very claustrophobic. Sensory aspects, yep, the noise could be horrendous. I don't know. For those who have used it, do they give you headphones or defenders, or you got to go in blind? Sensory issues, cost, they are very expensive. This is why hospitals only have a limited supply. If you want, you could not do this for every single person with a neurodevelopmental disorder. Just wouldn't be feasible. Radiation, yep, it's not a lot, but any radiation, you don't want too much of it. Keep it to a minimal. Not enough information. I would probably argue maybe even too much information. But the crucial thing here is we don't know how to interpret that information. It's giving a dog a color picture that you just took. The dog sees it in black and white. The information is there, and they're just not able to process it. Claustrophobic, absolutely, not fully understanding. But yet, in order to train people to interpret the images, it's really expensive, it takes a long time, and it's a very niche expertise. This isn't something that the average person would be able to interpret. You'd be like, oh, that's a cool picture, but you wouldn't be able to tell it much about it unless you knew. Forgetting to take metal off. Yeah, very true. Vicky says, yes, I had headphones with radio playing, but I did go private. I guess the NHS doesn't have earpods or headphones, but it's good that you can have them. Jess says, for me, the sound is so intense, it caused me to shut down. That would be bad out in the world. When I'm in a safe place, it just puts me to sleep. I don't think I would like one. Presumably plastic headphones. I would guess so. On a unrelated note, I saw headphones that were created for the prison system and they were completely transparent. They definitely can make different things for different uses. You'd imagine though that headphones would have to have some metal in order for them to work. On here are some of the biggest downsides, and a lot of them you already mentioned. I want you here to rank them. What is the biggest downside to the least downside? And there's some here that we didn't mention. One that I particularly want to point out is motion artifacts. Think of an MRI machine like a long exposure. When you set your camera up and you want to see the stars move across the sky, great. But if you want to catch an action shot like sport, oh what? Why does it keep doing that? When you want to take a action shot, MRIs aren't going to be great. They get blurry. When something's blurry, you can't see it very well. High costs, very expensive. They're not coming down in cost anytime soon. Complex data interpretation, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, AI looks like it could really help on this, but we need a very large data model. This information isn't public, not specific findings. It gives you a broad view. It's not going to be able to say, hey, you've got ADHD right there. What it can do is say, you've got this characteristic or this pattern, which is often apparent in those with ADHD. It doesn't give you a fine solution. It gives you a gist. Time consuming? Yeah, they take some time. For those of you who had them, how long did they take roughly? The headphones they gave me were awful, Marsh says. Not good quality, not surround sound, Adobe Atmos. I didn't realize you could request an MRI to understand your ADHD brain. You can't in UK, but it would be amazing. It's more about talking about the possibilities. We do currently do MRI for those with ADHD, but this is purely for a research perspective. Researchers, doctors, people with funding will do it, but it's not something like the average Joe would do. You'd have to go private. But even if you went private, I don't know what you would hope to gain from it because the benefit is not concrete enough at the moment. Marsh said maybe 5 minutes. I was about 6, so I can't really remember. I'll let you off on that. Vicky says 30 minutes-ish. Jess says an hour, half an hour, 40 minutes. Heather still in it to this day, forever. It depends on when you're being scanned. You also sometimes have to redo the scans if you're moving around too much, if you're fidgeting. On here, we talked about motion blur. It's a real thing. Those with ADHD can be problematic, particularly in children. Which of these scans is someone ruffling about, moving side to side, not staying still? You can see why this might happen because it is noisy, loud, and cramped. If you are hyperventilating and panicking, you're probably going to jiggle around a little bit. That is going to give images that just aren't that useful. You're right is first one. That is why the images may not be so useful. Where CAT scans, on the other hand, are a lot quicker, but also a lot less useful. You do have to take the person in consideration, whether or not they'd be an ideal candidate compared to, if you're not an ideal candidate, if you're someone who can't stay still, is it really worth strapping someone down so they can't move? That could be very traumatic, or is it best just not to do it? We've got a motion reducing MRI technique, maybe better benefits. There are currently motion reducing approaches that can be used. Also is AI, which is able to remove motion blur. There are things that are getting better and it is getting easier. But these machines and these different softwares are available at the moment. You may get lucky, you may not. Marsh says, I remember they kept telling me to stay still. Yeah, point proven. Jess says, a friend who has intense claustrophobia requested having her daughter in the room during the scan to hold her hand. Was she allowed it in the end? Oh yeah. MRI for ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, can assess more than just structure. It can also evaluate function, not just the physical makeup, but also how things are moving and flowing in the brain. Because we know ADHD is around neurotransmitters, the chemicals in our brain and how the brain processes them. We can look at chemistry and function. We can look at how drugs are flowing around the body and the brain, whether or not they're being absorbed, what parts are they targeting. We can see how the wiring matures over time. So you can take a scan of a brain now and a couple months later, after you've been taking the medication, take another and be able to see the dots. This is not in real time. So you're just going to get shots, very small frames per second, but it still gives you more of a picture than you would have had otherwise. Because let's face it, when we've all been diagnosed for ADHD, you get one diagnosis, they never see you again. They're not like, all right, let's have a review in a couple months' time. You get it, you're done. And then it's up to you to go on your own journey. Where MRI would be a much more regular intervention so you can see how things are working or not. Vicky says the private ones are bigger, I think, not as claustrophobic. They also have mirrors set up so I could see out and I didn't feel like I was in close space at all. That's interesting. What does the future hold? There are some new approaches called scan for all seasons or multi-contrast or quantitative MRIs. What they basically do here is they take different scans at different contrast and it allows you to get different amounts of information. As you can see this scan here, as we are changing contrast, it is bringing out different pieces of information that are becoming with greater view. So you're able to see how things are subtle contrast, different chemicals, maybe more gray matter, white matter. And these can be really useful for getting a variety of data sources, different subjects. And it also means you don't have to have multiple scans. You can have one scan and you'll get a lot more data from it, which may be better for those with ADHD or those who really struggle with sensory needs and will not ever get back in that machine again because maybe it was traumatic. We are going to be looking at how the brain develops and how taking pictures at different points in time can allow us to know how it develops. And we know ADHD happens really early on in life. Here, these are all pictures of kids' brains. Which one do you think is a 22-week-old brain? Everyone's putting their money on the last one. Can we identify ADHD through these scans? We've already mentioned it. No, we cannot, but we may be able to understand markers. Let's say the brain has lots of different markers, which are common with those with ADHD. That might mean that it is more likely that you may have it, but it doesn't mean you definitely do. Let's get the answer. Yeah, it is this one. So it's interesting. Initially, I would have thought that one because it looks like it had more detail. But this is a very in-your-face example of how we notice changes within the brain. But if you only do it in a few weeks apart or up with medication, the differences would be more minor and you'd have to be more specialist in order to be able to spot them. For the future, because who doesn't love exciting new tech to scare us? How could this be applied to ADHD? We spoke about it from a research perspective because that is where we're at the moment. But who knows? We could do whatever we want in the future. Machine learning is really fascinating. In short, it is when we have an insane amount of data. We use computer systems to look for patterns. Kind of like a specialist in Where's Wally, a machine that is able to find tiny detail. What they'll do is they'll have one picture that is of a typical brain, one image of a non-typical brain, and then you tell the computer what's the difference here. Then you do it again and again. And next time you show an image of a typical brain, the computer will be like, I know exactly what's different in this image, and it'll be able to pinpoint it. First of all, for this to work, we need a lot of pictures of our brain. We don't currently have that, but we are developing it and we need to get a bit more collaborative. Then we need to do some data analytics. This is where we use the machine learning. This is truly understanding the images. It's more than just having the images, it's about understanding them. Then we use neural network models. Essentially, when you search onto Google, it searches the entire internet all at once. This is what it's doing. It's searching every single brain and looking for similarities, looking for contrast. Finally, we'll have a brain-inspired AI model. It'll be able to say, yep, this looks exactly like the majority of people who have ADHD in theory. This would require more than we have available at the moment, but they have done tests at the moment, which are really promising. Do you know any interesting case studies about neuroimaging or someone with ADHD over a long period of time? I do, and some of those references have been put in here. I normally go to PubMed or Google Scholar. The quality varies, but they do exist. Could we realistically use machine learning, large language models, and data models to diagnose ADHD? If we were to do it, we would need to have a lot of healthy individuals. Remember, healthy in this context just means typical. That's just the language they tend to use. That's the first point. Second, we need to compare it with ADHD patients. We need psychiatrists, for example, to say, yep, these people here all have ADHD. We need the traditional approach of diagnosing first. Then we need all of those as individuals to have scans. Then we need to say what makes their brain different to those without ADHD. This could be tricky because first of all, no one has pure ADHD. Our brains are co-occurrence. We will have multiple things going on. Let's say you have ADHD and autism. Would that skew up the results? What happens if you have ADHD-like symptoms, but actually don't have ADHD? Would that skew up the results? So you need a lot of data to mitigate for outliers. Then we use the algorithms to essentially find the difference and be able to sort things out. This is a bit scary, personally. Don't get me wrong, it sounds exciting, but is this actually what we want to happen? Should we not be focusing on support strategies and adjustments and understanding, rather than trying to categorize people even further than we already have? You tell me, honestly. This is controversial. I want to know. Marsh says, what website did you say you use for ADHD brain case studies? I'd love to write them down. Sorry, I didn't catch it. It's Google Scholar and PubMed. PubMed is standard one. Google Scholar gets a bit of slack, but honestly, I find it still really useful. Some of the things are behind paywalls, but you'll normally still be able to get the headline on most of them. That's so interesting. 100% are against it. Why are you against it? Now some of you changing your mind. There's an interesting study that was done in 2010 when they were able to diagnose autism with 90% accuracy from a 5-minute scan. That is crazy. Maybe that's the wrong word, but it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? That was a while ago now, and we still aren't using this. Maybe it just wasn't good enough. 90%, I reckon that's way higher than the likelihood of people getting diagnosed the traditional way and it being right or wrong. Vicky says, I think it would be useful, but it's still too early to rely 100% on technology. Yeah, maybe we could do it as a part of the discussion, like a screen. April says, diagnose made by AI may not be as accurate as diagnose made by humans. Our whole mission is about creating awareness and understanding. I think it might make that message harder to get across to people. It'll be a very hard and fast line. Do you get help? Do you not get help? That will be determined by a computer algorithm. This is where we get a little bit sci-fi. Jess says, my concerns would be no further investigation if computer says no. Yeah, computer says no, mate. Can't be wrong, but computers make mistakes. 90% accuracy sounds good, but what if you're in the 10% who would benefit from support, but computer says no and you don't get the help? AI is known to get things wrong way too often. Yeah, AI is always hallucinating. I love AI, right? But so damn cocky and so certain about the answer. Trust me, it's the answer. I was like, are you sure? 100% sure, mate. Are you really sure? Oh yeah, actually, I'm completely wrong. You are right. Could you just say AI, I think this is the answer. It might be the answer. As a humble robot, I believe this is the answer. But no, AI is so damn certain. If you got Trump and squished him up on the computer and asked him questions, he'd lie to you, but you'd believe him because damn, that guy sounds convincing. Anyway, there's my rant for AI. Other promising studies have shown on Alzheimer's where we've combined these measures where we're able to predict Alzheimer's 2 years in advance with 90% accuracy. ADHD, a bit iffy. But with Alzheimer's, which is a horrific disease, very different from ADHD, but still neurological, if you could tell someone 2 years in advance, that could make the world of difference. I do think this technology will be developed further, but I think we will see it on conditions which we deem as negative, wrong, mental health, way before we'll ever get to neurodevelopmental, because they just have far more positive implications and they have much greater use. ADHD would be good to know. Alzheimer's and things like cancer would be essential. Here is a real ethical question. Would you want to know if your unborn child would develop ADHD? If you find out, you can't do anything about it. We're not going to be aborting the baby because of ADHD, because ADHD can be at value. But it does mean there are going to be some more challenges. Could you do much more prep? I guess you could read some more books about it. Or would you not want to know because it makes no difference and you want to treat the child as a blank canvas and develop for their needs rather than setting benchmarks? You don't want to limit someone's potential before they've even had the opportunity to show that they can do whatever they want. This is tricky. Being better prepared really could work. Marsh says, by the time Alzheimer's get diagnosed, it's almost too late to treat it effectively. Absolutely right. Alzheimer's, you would want to know. ADHD is not too late if you find out later on down the line. All of you would like to know. Really interesting. Melissa says, would be good to have a good start on the waiting list for support. Yeah, that would. Or would it just push the waiting list eventually? You might get a head start in the early days. Vicky says, it would have to be useful for me to know with my children. All 4 have ADHD. So I could have started getting the support in place much sooner. My eldest is leaving school next summer and still not got all the support he should have. I think, yeah, a lot of us would like to know for the reason that we can have better understanding and support. You could, however, see how this information could, in the wrong hands, be taken negatively. Let's look at some takeaways. MRI scans studies brain structures, functions, chemistries, and maturation as it gets older. Essentially, they can do a lot of things. CAT scans, still useful, maybe have less uses. Pros and cons, they're used for different things. Monitor the development. MRI can track brain developments. Remember, MRI isn't done in real time. Once that image is done, it is done, and you have to do it again for a more up-to-date image. Machine learning, we aren't there yet. Don't be telling everyone Nat told me that I can use some chat GPT to ADHD me. We're not there yet. But it is looking like we are getting that way a lot faster than people may have thought before. Accuracy, machine learning is getting scarily accurate. We're not there yet. At the moment, even a little error isn't good enough. Driverless cars. Let's face it, people suck at driving. And they are the number one cause of death, I believe, in terms of accidental death. But if a driverless car even kills one person, we'd be in outrage. Machine learning has to be not just as good as humans, but it has to be way better, nearly flawless before the wider society will accept it. And Noisha says, a question for the ADHDers. Do you face a slump after exercising? How do you manage your slumps throughout the day without medication? Again, that's something you could do with MRIs. You could scan someone before exercise and after and see if this slump is due to, say, a lack of certain chemicals or different things. If any of you do have ADHD, don't be waiting to have an MRI scan. At this moment in time, you're wasting your time and your money. What you should do is get support, as I mentioned. Get a workplace needs assessment. This is when you can get support in the workplace. This is for people in the UK. You do not need a diagnosis. And this is tangible, real world help that you can have relatively soon in a couple of months' time if you apply right now. Do check that out if you think that sounds relevant. Here is a library. These ones aren't based on ADHD because I'll be real, the ADHD research is still developing. What I did for a lot of this is look at well-established research and then for how would this work? We applied it with an ADHD lens. Some things were made with assumptions. However, all the things that were made on ADHD research were cited throughout the presentation. This has been recorded and you will be able to watch it on YouTube. My reading recommendation, which I don't often do, but is Neuroethics. This isn't necessarily ADHD focused. I found it a fascinating read. If you are both excited about the future, AI and machine learning and using neuroimaging, but also terrified, this book will look at the direction it is currently heading in. The good, the bad, what we need to do right now in order to set up good parameters. Our next webinar, if you are interested and excited to attend, is Education and Autism. Here is our YouTube channel. Do click that sub button, keep subscribing, get into 7,000. And we do have other ones on neuroimaging as well on this. Lastly, feel free to contact us if you want to get in touch, have any advice, want a workplace needs assessment. Anyway, hope you all found that useful, entertaining, interesting, thought-provoking, all of those great things. Hopefully I'll see you all next week. Thanks again for coming today. It's always a pleasure. Appreciate it. Bye.